Imagine being like the most powerful human being on earth. I mean, you can execute political rivals with a whisper, you can seize any wealth, command these vast armies, and the entire known world essentially treats you like a living god.
Yeah, it's a level of power that's almost hard to comprehend today.
Right. So what do you do at night, sitting in a freezing, muddy military tent on the edge of the empire? You write a private list, scolding yourself not to be a jerk.
Which completely shatters how we expect absolute power to look, you know? I mean, we are so conditioned to seeing leaders build monuments to their own ego.
Oh, for sure, like ancient pyramids or whatever.
Exactly. Or, a modern CEO's ghost-written memoir detailing all their brilliant, flawless strategies. We expect grandiosity.
But today, we are diving into what is essentially the ultimate anti-ego document. And for you listening, we're pulling our insights for this deep dive from a really brilliant Estonian translation and its scholarly afterword. It's Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, translated by Jan Unt, and in this edition, it's titled Eisendale.
Right, which translates literally to himself.
Yeah. And that title, I think, captures the entire mission of this deep dive. We are exploring the private, like completely unpublished diary of a Roman emperor. We want to understand why a man with unchecked power treated modesty and moral discipline as a matter of, well, basically psychological survival.
And more importantly, we're going to look at the underlying mechanics of his philosophy to see how you can extract those exact same tools to manage stress and, build resilience today.
Because the premise of this document, even surviving, is just, it's a historical accident.
Oh, absolutely. It was purely a cognitive exercise. It was a private spiritual diary that was never meant for the Roman public, let alone us sitting here, 1,800 years later, reading his private thoughts.
Which is why the context of his writing environment is so crucial to understand first. Aurelius wasn't sitting in some marble palace being hand-fed grapes. The scholarly afterword really points out that he was often out on these brutal military campaigns.
Yeah, we're talking about the freezing camps near Carnuntum or, along the river Granua.
Right, fighting off Germanic tribes like the Quadi.
Yeah.
And doing all this right in the middle of a devastating plague that was just sweeping through his empire.
He was managing an absolute geopolitical nightmare. I mean, you have betrayals by his own generals, the endless toxic politics back in Rome, and just the sheer administrative weight of running the empire.
That must have been incredibly isolating.
It is. Absolute power isolates you completely. It distorts reality because everyone around you is just managing your perception of them for their own gain. And they afterward makes this really compelling case that Eisendale was his daily survival mechanism against that distortion.
Like an anchor.
Exactly. He knew the external circumstances of his role were, well, they were intoxicating, so he had to build an internal anchor to stay grounded.
And you see that anchor immediately in book one. Because, you'd think the secret diary of an emperor would be full of state secrets or paranoid gossip about his rivals.
You'd expect a burn book, basically.
Right, a Roman burn book. But instead, it reads like this profound gratitude journal. He essentially lists all the people who taught him how to be a decent human being.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, actually.
It is. He thanks his grandfather, Verus, for modeling good morals and the absence of anger. He thanks his teachers, like Rusticus, for pulling him away from fancy, empty rhetoric. And Apollonius for showing him how to be fiercely independent but deeply compassionate.
What he's doing there is he's actively programming his mind to value character over status. Notice who he's praising and why.
Yeah, he's not talking about how rich they are.
No, not at all. He doesn't praise his mentors for their wealth or their military conquests. He praises them for their ability to endure free speech from critics without, flying into a violent rage.
Which is huge for an emperor.
Exactly. He is isolating the exact traits he desperately needs to function without becoming a tyrant.
And that tolerance for criticism wasn't just some abstract theory for him. I mean, he had to actually face the Roman Senate and his generals every single day. And we actually have his exact mental prep routine for dealing with infuriating people.
Which maps so perfectly onto anyone dealing with a toxic workplace today.
It really does.
Yeah.
In book 2, he lays out this dawn meditation. He tells himself, like before he even gets out of the tent in the morning, to expect to meet people today who are meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, and envious.
He prepares his mind for the absolute worst of human behavior. But the philosophical mechanism at play here is what's really fascinating.
How so?
Well, he immediately follows that dark thought up by reminding himself that these people act this way out of ignorance of what is truly good and evil. He uses this beautiful anatomical analogy.
Oh, the teeth thing.
Yeah. He states that humans are born for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, or like the rows of the upper and lower teeth. We're meant to work together.
Okay, but I have to push back on this a little bit. Because waking up every single morning, explicitly expecting everyone you meet to be terrible, doesn't that just make you a miserable, cynical person to be around?
It sounds like it would, right?
Yeah, like if I start my Tuesday telling myself my coworkers are going to be deceitful and arrogant, my morning is ruined before I even make my coffee.
Well, it sounds like a recipe for misery until you look at the mechanics of human anger. Think about when you experience the most acute frustration in your own life.
Usually when things don't go my way.
Right. You are angry when reality violently clashes with your expectations. When you expect your commute to be totally clear and someone cuts you off, your blood pressure spikes.
Oh yeah, road rage is real.
But if you walk out the door expecting the highway to be a chaotic mess, you just put on some music and drive. By vividly anticipating bad behavior, Aurelius completely robs it of its power to shock or disappoint him.
Oh, I see. So he's treating human flaws kind of like the weather. Like, you don't get furious at a rainstorm for making you wet, because it's just doing what rain does. You should bring an umbrella.
That is a perfect way to frame it.
Mm-hmm.
And this brings us to the core engine of Stoic philosophy, which is the dichotomy of control.
Right, drawing that hard line between what's up to us and what isn't.
Exactly. You cannot control other people's actions. You cannot control if a general betrays you or, if a colleague steals credit for your presentation at work. But you have absolute, unquestionable control over your reaction to that event.
And he writes about that in Book 6.
Yes.
Wow.
He writes that the best way to avenge yourself is to not become like the wrongdoer. He is actively reclaiming his agency there. He refuses to let someone else's broken moral compass dictate his internal emotional state.
Wow. That shift in perspective completely reframes how we think about burnout today, I think. Because if the people and the politics around us are fundamentally out of our control, we naturally look for an escape hatch.
Oh, constantly. We're obsessed with escaping.
Right. The modern reflex is entirely based on fleeing. You get overwhelmed at work, so you drop $1,000 on a wellness retreat. You book a cabin in the woods for a digital detox, or you flee to a beach in Mexico. We're so convinced that changing our physical coordinates will magically fix our internal exhaustion.
And Aurelius tackles this exact illusion in Book 4, and it is just a profound observation on human nature. He notes that people are always seeking retreats for themselves in the country, by the sea, or in the mountains.
Even 1,800 years ago, people were trying to book a weekend in the Hamptons.
Pretty much. And he felt that urge too. He was just as susceptible to the desire to run away from his problems.
But then he points out the structural flaw in that plan, right? Because taking a vacation doesn't actually cure the source of the stress.
Exactly. He states that nowhere is more quiet or more free from trouble than a man's own soul. If you don't build an internal retreat, the external retreat is completely useless. He advises that you must constantly grant yourself this internal space to renew yourself.
Because if you are deeply stressed out and anxious, taking your anxious mind to a beautiful beach in Hawaii just gives you a highly anxious mind on a beautiful beach.
You didn't leave the problem behind.
Right. The location didn't cure the core problem. The machinery of your stress came with you on the plane.
And the scholarly afterword of the Estonian translation makes a really brilliant connection here, linking this ancient concept directly to modern psychotherapy, specifically Viktor Frankl's logotherapy.
Oh, wow. From Man's Search for Meaning.
Exactly. It directly mirrors Frankl's realization in the concentration camps, that even in the absolute horrors of the Holocaust, when every physical freedom is stripped away, the final human freedom is the ability to choose your cognitive response to your circumstances.
That's incredibly powerful. So the Stoics were essentially practicing this highly refined, primitive form of cognitive behavioral therapy.
They absolutely were. They understood the concept of the mind's ruling part. True resilience isn't about manipulating your external environment to perfectly suit your preferences. It's about changing your internal framing.
Because you literally can't control the external environment anyway.
Right. If you don't fix the ruling part of your mind, the external environment simply doesn't matter. You have to build an inner citadel.
An inner citadel. I love that imagery. A fortress inside your own head. You can retreat there for 5 minutes right at your desk while your boss is yelling or your inbox is melting down without needing to buy a plane ticket.
Yes, but the tool Aurelius uses to build that citadel is going to sound incredibly jarring to a modern listener.
Okay, lay it on me.
To maintain that inner peace, he reflects constantly, almost obsessively, on death and transience.
The practice of memento mori. Remember that you must die.
Precisely. And he is relentless about it throughout books 2, 3, and 4. He constantly reminds himself that our bodies are just a little flesh, a little breath, and the ruling mind.
He kind of zooms out and looks at history, right?
He does. He looks back at history and notes that great doctors, like Hippocrates, cured thousands of patients but still caught a disease and died. He looks at the conquerors, Alexander the Great, Pompey, Julius Caesar,
Men who literally reshaped the geopolitical map of the world.
and they still died. They turned to dust just the same as the lowest soldiers in their ranks. He writes that everything is only for a day, both the person remembering and the thing remembered. The bodies turn to dust and the memories fade into a vast eternity.
Okay, but again, isn't this where the philosophy goes a bit off the rails for a normal person? Because thinking about death constantly sounds incredibly morbid.
It's definitely a tough pill to swallow at first.
Yeah, I mean, how is reminding yourself that you're just a speck of cosmic dust supposed to be helpful when you are just trying to get through a busy week, pay your mortgage, and keep your life together? Doesn't that just induce a massive existential crisis where everything feels pointless?
It feels counterintuitive to us because our culture works overtime to hide death and glorify legacy. We're obsessed with leaving a mark, but within the mechanics of Stoic philosophy, this is actually intensely liberating.
Liberating. How so?
It serves as the ultimate prioritization tool. Think about what generates the majority of your daily anxiety. It's rarely actual matters of life and death. It's a passive-aggressive email. It's a minor embarrassment. It's stressing over what a stranger thinks of you on the internet.
Oh man, the absolute trivia of life.
Exactly. When you filter those trivial anxieties through the infinite timeline of the universe, they instantly evaporate. If you truly internalize that life is incredibly short and that historical legacy is a fiction.
Because the people remembering you are going to die too.
Right. Because they will also eventually die and be forgotten. Realizing that frees you. It strips away the exhausting desire to seek fame, hoard wealth, or hold on to petty grievances. It forces your brain to focus strictly on what is in front of you right now in the present moment.
Wow. Yeah, I guess you wouldn't spend the last 24 hours of your life arguing with someone in a YouTube comment section or fuming about a traffic jam, so why are you spending a random Tuesday doing it?
Yeah. Exactly. Alexander the Great and his mule driver were buried in the exact same ground. So why exhaust yourself compromising your morals to be Alexander the Great just for the sake of applause? Why not just focus on being a rational, cooperative human being today?
It's like an instant clarity filter. And what makes this deep dive so compelling is how that grand cosmic clarity clashes with his mundane daily struggles. Because this guy ruled the known world, commanded legions, and yet in Book 5, he writes about his struggle to simply get out of bed.
Oh, the famous passage about the blankets. I love this one.
Me too. He writes about waking up unwillingly, feeling cold, and wanting to just huddle under the warm blankets.
Which is so human. Who hasn't negotiated with their alarm clock at 6:30 on a Monday morning?
Literally everyone. But instead of hitting snooze, he initiates this internal dialogue to force himself up. He says, I am rising to the work of a human being. He literally interrogates his own laziness, asking himself if he was created to just stay warm under the covers or if he has a fundamental duty to perform in the world.
It perfectly illustrates that the Stoic is not an emotionless robot immune to laziness or comfort.
Right, they still feel it.
Exactly. A Stoic feels the intense desire to sleep in, fully acknowledges the physical pull of that comfort, and then uses their rational, ruling mind to override it for the sake of their duty to the human community.
Okay, but wait. If the quote-unquote armor of Stoicism is just accepting that you can't control the outside world, doesn't that inherently make you a terrible citizen?
That is the big question.
Right, like if I see a systemic injustice, say a corrupt law or immense poverty, the inner Citadel sounds like a really convenient place to just hide and do nothing. If I only focus on perfecting my reaction, who actually fixes the world?
You've hit on the exact structural weakness of the philosophy, which the Estonian scholarly afterwards spends a significant amount of time dissecting.
Oh, really? So they address this passivity issue.
They do, because the psychological mechanism of Stoicism relies on severing your emotional well-being from external outcomes. You focus entirely on the integrity of your own internal choices, but the inherent danger there is a gradual slide into passivity or quietism.
Yeah, because if you convince yourself the external world doesn't truly matter to your happiness, you just stop trying to improve it.
Precisely the critique. If faced with profound societal injustice, A strict interpretation of this mindset might lead someone to say, well, I cannot control the systemic corruption. I can only control my reaction to it. Therefore, I will simply endure it with dignity and maintain my own moral purity.
Which feels like a cop-out.
And modern critics argue exactly that. They say that sometimes you absolutely should be angry. Sometimes you should let the friction of the world motivate you to tear down a corrupt system, even if success isn't guaranteed.
Yeah, because if you use the inner citadel as a bunker to hide from the suffering of others, you've completely missed his point from earlier about humans being made for cooperation, like the upper and lower teeth.
Exactly. You can't just detach from society. And Aurelius himself wasn't passive. He was running an empire, he was passing legislation, and trying to improve the legal standing of slaves and orphans where he could.
So he was putting in the work.
He was. But if you take his private coping mechanism and apply it blindly today without his sense of duty, you just become indifferent.
I see. It requires a very delicate balance then.
It does. You need the emotional armor so you don't burn out from the chaos of the world, but you cannot let that armor calcify into apathy regarding the need for actual material change.
That makes total sense. So synthesizing everything we've pulled from this Estonian translation and its context, let's look at the core practical mechanics you can extract from this Roman emperor for your own life.
Let's do it.
First, fiercely apply the dichotomy of control. When reality clashes with your plans, pause and locate the boundary between what you can physically change and what you can only react to. Do not let the uncontrollable conquer your ruling mind. Use that dawn meditation mechanism. Actively anticipate the friction of difficult people so that their behavior loses the element of surprise and its power to spike your anger.
And second, recognize the illusion of the external escape. A vacation will not cure burnout if your internal framing is still chaotic. You have to do the harder work of building your own inner retreat by shifting how you perceive your stressors. Apply that logotherapy principle that you always control your cognitive response.
And third, use the brevity of life as an active tool. You are a little flesh, a little breath, here for a millisecond of cosmic time. Use that overwhelming scale not to fall into despair, but to liberate yourself from the exhaustion of trivial arguments, petty ego, and the pursuit of validation that simply will not matter.
It really is a profound way to live.
It is. We started this deep dive looking at what happens when someone holds absolute power. We expect them to leave behind a monument to their greatness, but Aurelius left behind a manual on how to defeat your own ego.
Which is the greatest victory anyway.
Totally. Which leaves me with a final thought for you to ponder as you step back into your day.
I'm ready.
Imagine if Marcus Aurelius had social media. We live in an era governed by algorithms that are explicitly designed to demand we externalize our internal thoughts for public validation. Every platform rewards us for reacting loudly, instantly, and emotionally to things completely outside our control.
That is such a good point.
Right. If the most powerful man in the ancient world had to isolate himself in a freezing tent just to hear his own ruling mind, how much harder do you have to work to build an inner citadel when the entire architecture of the modern internet is trying to tear it down?
Wow. The internet really is the ultimate test of Stoicism.
It really is.
Yeah.
The blurry lens of history might eventually forget us all, but the integrity of your inner citadel today is entirely up to you.
A phenomenal challenge to leave on.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep building that citadel.